James sat at his kitchen table, reading the newspaper and trembling with rage. As the duly appointed state auditor of Illinois, he was accustomed to being criticized by disgruntled Republicans. But this was something else altogether. This was a letter to the editor written by a sharp-tongued woman who identified herself only as Rebecca. Not only did this Rebecca accuse him of bankrupting her state with his, quote, disastrous Democratic policies, she did so in a way that mocked his vanity. In the most offensive passage, she imagined him addressing a group of distraught women unable to pay their bills because of his recent decision to eliminate paper money in favor of gold and silver. "Dear girls," the passage began, "I can see you are in distress, but please understand, I cannot marry you all. Too well I know how much you suffer, but do remember, it is not my fault that I am so handsome and so very interesting." The gall, the temerity. What did this Rebecca know about the complexities of modern banking? And what sort of editor would allow such baseless aspersions to be cast from a critic with no last name? Livid and humiliated, James paid a visit to the editor of the Sangamo Journal, who tried to explain the nature of satire to the apoplectic Democrat to no avail. He insisted on knowing the identity of Rebecca. So, the editor told him. Rebecca, he said, was actually a man, a concerned citizen, whose real name the state auditor recognized immediately. James wasted no time demanding an apology, which he sent via courier. It read, "Sir, I have become the object of slander, vituperation, and personal abuse. Only a full retraction may prevent consequences, which no one will regret more than myself." The concerned citizen, called Rebecca, delighted to learn that his words had struck a chord, responded thusly, "I might consider a public retraction if you could but reframe your request in a more gentlemanly fashion." Once again, James trembled with rage. A more gentlemanly fashion? Was he serious? This cowardly gutter snipe impugns his good name in the most unforgivable fashion, and now, given the opportunity to apologize, he instead chooses to lecture the state auditor on manners? This was outrageous. So James did the only thing an honorable man in his position could do. He challenged the concerned citizen, called Rebecca, to a duel. "Pistols at dawn," he demanded. "My honor requires it." In those days, dueling was illegal in Illinois, but over on Bloody Island, just a quick boat ride across the Mississippi, the great state of Missouri had no law forbidding grown men from shooting each other over a question of honor. Unfortunately, in his rush for satisfaction, James had overlooked an important bit of dueling protocol. You see, the challenger does not determine the weapons or the venue. That falls to the one being challenged. Thus, his invitation was accepted, but not his terms. "Never mind the pistols," said the concerned citizen, called Rebecca. "Let us settle the matter like men. Let us proceed at dawn with broadswords in a pit." Broadswords? In a pit? Good Lord, thought James. Who was this guy? What sort of savage fights with broadswords when pistols were so readily available? But the concerned citizen called Rebecca had further conditions. He demanded they place a plank on the ground between them, a divider placed at the bottom of the pit which neither combatant could step across. Crossing the plank, he insisted, would be considered a mortal foul, punishable by an immediate bullet to the head. In that moment, James began to see the magnitude of his miscalculation. He was an excellent shot, but had little experience with a sword. Worse, He was only 5'8". His rival was much taller, with arms that dangled nearly to his knees and hands the size of ham hocks. In those enormous mitts, a broadsword would be a fearsome weapon indeed. And with an extra foot of reach, James realized he'd never get close enough to land a blow. But there was no backing out now. His honor would not permit it. And so, on the morning of September 22nd, 1842, a large crowd sailed over to Bloody Island to watch two honorable men hack each other to pieces. Inside the pit, on his side of the plank, James felt sick to his stomach. The giant across from him seemed utterly relaxed as he swung the massive cavalry sword over his head, grinning as the blade swooshed through the air. It was a horrifying sound, and it made James wonder about the crunch it would make when it collided with his flesh and bone. His rival walked to the far side of the enclosure where a thick branch from an oak tree drooped into the pit. Still grinning, he swung his sword with one hand, severing the branch in a single blow and earning a collective gasp from those who assembled. Oh, this would be over very quickly. James felt his sphincter tighten as his adversary walked up to the plank that divided them, waiting to engage. His options now were simple: refuse to step forward and live the rest of his life in shame, or square off against a man who was certain to kill him. Ultimately, James chose death before dishonor and slowly approached his towering rival, who surprised him with an unanticipated offer. Are you quite certain, sir, that you would not prefer to discuss the root causes of our dispute before we come to blows? James quickly accepted, as the crowd above them breathed a sigh of relief. Though many in attendance would have liked to see the state auditor run out of office, nobody wanted to see him hacked to death in a pit, including the concerned citizen, whose words had both instigated and diffused the entire situation. As for his choice of venue and weaponry, he later explained, I couldn't very well refuse his demand for satisfaction, but I didn't want the damned fella to kill me, which he would have surely done had I agreed to pistols. On the other hand, I didn't want to kill him either, but felt sure I could disarm him with the blade if it actually came to blows. The life spared that day belonged to James Shields, the only man ever elected senator to 3 different states, a vain but honorable man who went on to distinguish himself in battle as an officer in the Union Army. As for his adversary, the modern-day gladiator who could have killed him but didn't, he went on to become James Shields's boss, the same boss who promoted him to the rank of Major General 20 years after their aborted duel, proving once again it's better to bury the hatchet than swing the sword. Such was the deeply held belief of a concerned citizen who always preferred a diplomatic solution, but was willing, when necessary, to settle things with broadswords in a pit, which is pretty much what happened when the Army of Northern Virginia refused to back down, choosing instead to face off against the Army of the Potomac. Happily, America survived that terrible duel, and though we emerged from that metaphorical pit bloodied and forever changed, we were still united, thanks to a country lawyer who called himself Rebecca, long before the rest of the country called him president. A president named Lincoln.